Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we're going to talk about the Flash movie, its recent trailer and overall impressions, and whether it will be a success and provide a final bookend to the overall Snyderverse. Now there could be spoilers throughout for all movies and series within the current DC cinematic universe, so just beware when going into this overall video. Now as we all know, The Flash is the first live action cinematic outing of the famous DC character, and it's still set for release on June 16th, 2023, with Ezra Miller reprising his lead role from the character that we saw already, briefly in Batman vs Superman and later on in Justice League. The movie will also see Michael Keaton returning to his iconic portrayal as Batman, as well as Ben Affleck appearing with his version. Sasha Calle will be making her first appearance as Supergirl, and the movie will be directed by Andy Muschietti. Now of course, the film would adapt the famous comic book story Flashpoint, which involves Barry travelling back in time to save his mother from being murdered, and as a result causing an alternate timeline with lots of dystopian ramifications, where we see alternate versions of the iconic DC characters. Now unless you've abstained from social media and the online entertainment coverage, this movie has been surrounded by so much debate and controversy, mainly involving Ezra Miller with his arrests for assaults in Hawaii and burglary charges in Vermont and allegations of grooming minors. We talk of the movie's potential story, and will it be the conclusion point to the upcoming reboot of the DC universe, as what has already been confirmed by the newly appointed CEO of DC Films, James Gunn, who recently announced his intended projects for the future within his DC universe. So we could spend an eternity about talking about all of the narrative around the film, but we will of course focus on the first full trailer that was recently released on Sunday the 12th of February 2023 for the latest Super Bowl. So then, in terms of the trailer, my first impressions are very mixed. At times the trailer looked visually very bright and colourful. There was some quite striking comic book imagery and effects, and it really had that comic book pop and vibrancy about it. In terms of scale, they're certainly going all out for the spectacle and action, which really should be the case for any Flashpoint adaptation. But there were parts of the trailer that didn't look finished, like they needed some extra rendering. Some shots had that plastic CGI rubbery feel about it, which hopefully will get fixed when we see the final version on release. Now although this is just a trailer, the plot and story looks like it could get messy and chaotic, and whether they can define the story enough to pull in more general audiences remains to be seen. So we're first of all going to talk about the Flash suit itself, and at times it doesn't look right when we see these early shots of Ezra in the costume. It looks like he's not wearing it, and I understand a lot of these suits today are done by motion capture and CGI, which is added on afterwards, but it just looks pasted on and has much more of that plastic feel towards it. At least the previous version that we saw within the Snyder films, whilst I wasn't a fan of the aesthetic, at least it looked a bit more tangible, it looked a bit more physical, and I'm not really a fan of these kind of plastic lines that we see all over the costume itself. Now in other shots, the suit looked to be much better in motion. We have some of these shots where we see him running up the building as the universe looks like it's collapsing, and this looks great, resembling very much of that Injustice computer game trailer many years ago. If you remember, you can see it online on YouTube, giving that same sort of overtones as what we saw with that presentation there. So I'm not a fan of the costume, but it does look better when it's actually in live action motion. And it does seem that they've sorted out the issues with Barry running. It looks a lot better this time around. It doesn't look like he's floating around. It actually looks like there's some sort of physical coordination in terms of his running stride. So I'm glad they fixed that as well. Now we do of course get scenes of Barry's family, and this ties to the source material of him going back in time to save his mother. And these scenes look very good, and they'll be absolutely crucial in providing that heart and emotion amidst all of the CGI spectacle. We have this scene here where it looks like his mother is dying as his father is comforting her, so there will be a lot of back and forth in terms of flashbacks, and I just hope enough time is given for these moments to really have some emotional weight and impact. We then have this other shot of Barry getting consumed by lightning, like he's getting in the way of the other Barry being hit. Now, if you followed the leaks that surfaced online a while back surrounding this film, we do know that there will be two versions. The main story being that the Barry within the current timeline will go back in time and meet his previous self or his other self. And this certainly looks here that he's trying to recreate the lightning effect that gave him his powers, but he jumps in the way. And if you consider a lot of the leaks, what will happen initially, this will be how the future Barry loses his powers, again similar to the comic book story, and then he'll spend a passage of the film trying to get his powers back. Now, initially, it was speculated that the second version of Barry will be a far more darker, villainous take, and that this could be potentially the villain of the piece. But I'm not really seeing that now from this trailer. It very much looks like these two Barrys will be working in harmony together for most of the film. And I do have to say, the double effect where we see Barry talking to himself and holding him and pinning himself up against the wall, it looks absolutely great. You never doubt it for a second that these two people are the same and standing side by side. And it was also a good move to have them look different in terms of their hairstyle, so it helps us distinguish between their two personalities. And the film is going to hinge on the chemistry between these two characters, and so far from this trailer it looks okay for now. We then see Ben Affleck speaking with Barry, and I imagine this is a scene earlier on within the film. And this is when the questions arise as Barry talks about fixing things. Of course, they're probably talking about his ability to travel back in time. This is probably a follow-on from what we saw within both the Justice League and also Zack Snyder's Justice League as well. So we do ask, what is he talking about in terms of fixing? What exactly has happened post the events within the Justice League to bring about this kind of discussion? It could just be a general discussion between the two in terms of Barry's abilities and powers, where he talks about what he potentially could do, with Ben Affleck's Batman then telling him that also he could have the potential to destroy things. We then see a version of what is clearly Ben Affleck's Batman in a much more iconic blue and grey Batman costume that many fans have been desperate to see in live action. And I'm sorry to say, it looks really bad. It has that really unfinished look about it. I don't like the design where he has these kind of harnesses on his chest and his legs with these holes on them, and it just again has that more plastic feel about it. Again, we're asking, why exactly would Ben Affleck be in this type of costume? Will we again see an earlier sequence of Barry and this Ben Affleck's Batman fighting together, and this is where he's amended his costume? We'll wait and see. But overall, it doesn't really look good, and again, I'm going to assume that it will look far more better and finished when we see the final movie. Then had another shot of what it seems like is Ben Affleck's Batman on the bike, very reminiscent of the bike scene that we saw in Dark Knight Rises in that action climax. And there's been speculation a lot as to whether we will see Bale's version or George Clooney's version within this movie. Overall, I'd bet there's more chance that we'll see Clooney's version, but to be honest, I'm not really that hyped in seeing either Christian Bale or George Clooney in this film. We then talk about Sasha Calle's Supergirl, and I've never been a fan of the look or the costume style which has been adapted from the Lara Lane Kent version from the Injustice God Among Us comic book storyline. Now, I'm very old school. I still prefer the iconic original look with the blonde hair and the brighter costume with the skirt as well. But if we've been looking at the supposed leaks around this film, Supergirl's appearance will be a result of Barry's time travelling, and the whole Man of Steel story is basically retconned, where instead of Clark making it to Earth, it's actually Kara Zor-El that's made it to Earth, and we see Zod and the Kryptonian invasion coming to assumingly get the codex from her. So all of the Henry Cavill Superman fans will be very upset if this development happens. But admittedly, she does look very good in the costume. All of the flying sequences here, for the most part, look really great. Where she's using her heat vision, this also looks very good. No issues with the CGI here at all. She does look very good in the costume, I can't deny that. Now, there were some issues in the sequence where she's in the more ripped white vest, fighting off all the soldiers alongside Batman, and the CGI looks all out of proportion here when we get that slow motion sequence of her throwing a punch against one of the soldiers. Again, it just doesn't look right, and you think with a movie of this size and budget, we shouldn't really be getting shots like this. So again, I hope this is fixed in the final product. And it seems like this whole sequence will be part of Batman and the Flash having to rescue Kara, who's being kept captive in some sort of rogue military facility. Again, very much like the Flashpoint Paradox animated story arc, where like that story, it seems that we will be seeing a weakened, skeletal-like Kara in this certain shot here, and Barry has to resuscitate her by taking her outside into the sun. Now, there's a similar sequence that we see within the animated movie, and I think this scene here will play out very much in the same fashion. So there will be some progression of Kara discovering her powers and identity before suiting up. We then have this shot of Supergirl lifting someone up into the sky, and I think this is her trying to revive Barry's powers by getting him struck by lightning. So again, it's just like the source material. Now, in the comic books, originally it's Batman who tries to help Barry revive his powers by strapping him to a chair in order to him to get struck by lightning. So they have deviated a bit, but I think this is fine overall. It's still the same story beat, and there's nothing wrong for me in having Supergirl lifting him up to the sky to revive his powers. And speaking of Batman, we then have to talk about Michael Keaton. Still my favourite live action Batman overall, and there's been so much hype around his return. but I have to be honest, I'm not sold on the look within this trailer. Again, it has that plastic rubbery feel about it, very much the same as what we saw with Ezra and his costume, and it just doesn't look like it's fully on him. It's more the upper body in terms of the neck and the shoulders where the costume just looks off, like it doesn't fit his physique properly. The original suit in both Batman 89 and Batman Returns just look far more physical and again much more tangible. And when we see him in action swooping down and taking down the bad guys, it looks too animated and you just couldn't imagine the original version ever moving like this. It's the same issue that we had with Rogue One and the Darth Vader scene, where he moves far more faster and much more agile than the version that we saw in A New Hope, and despite it being the same character, it looks inconsistent. Now with all of the nostalgia beats that we saw throughout this trailer, we do assume that it will indeed be the same Batman from the Tim Burton universe, not some sort of variant. So again, people may pick up the inconsistencies in terms of how he behaves, how he looks, and how he moves. After watching this trailer a few times, I didn't hate the look after my initial first viewing, but I still think it doesn't look right, and maybe again it will look far more convincing when we watch the final movie. And as mentioned before, there's plenty of spectacle, and it looks very much like there will be some sort of big massive climatic battle where we see the two Flashes fighting alongside Supergirl against all of the Kryptonians. Again, we had some very cool shots of the two Flashes running next to each other. We see the different costumes coming together. And again, if we go by the leaks, the current timeline Flash will have the much more classic red and yellow costume, and the younger version of the Flash will have this prototype costume, which is much more inspired by the Batman costume, which is why it looks far more darker and grittier. And again, they've done a very smart move in distinguishing both the Flashes by having a different colour lightning. So the current timeline is running in all yellow and the younger version is running in all blue. And this is again just very smart, and it will just help us being able to recognise both the characters amidst all of the special effects in action. So overall, in terms of the trailer, I thought it was very good. Again, I'm just a bit unconvinced with some of the effect shots that will hopefully get fixed later on. I think the big problem that the movie has is the overall story and making it make enough sense for non-comic book fans and general audiences. Again, this should really be the movie that fully concludes the Snyderverse. The original story from the comic books indeed closed out the current era of the comic book universe to set up the new 52. So this movie really should be the last within the Snyderverse, but the problem is that Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom comes out later on in December. So will we have some connection in terms of perhaps an end credit scene or a cameo that will link to Aquaman? We do know that Jason Momoa, the actor who plays Aquaman, has been making recent Instagram posts where he's very excited about recent meetings with both James Gunn and Peter Safran. So I'm sure there will be some sort of connection from this movie going ahead into Aquaman, or it could be that there will be some connection at the end of Aquaman that will hint at some sort of future involvement for Jason Momoa within James Gunn's new DC era. Again, this is all speculation and we'll have to wait and see after these movies arrive. But overall, a good trailer, some very cool, exciting shots. It looks very colourful and bright and has that comic book dynamic about it, which is good to see. But just some issues with the CGI, and I'm still not convinced overall by Michael Keaton's Batman. But again, hopefully it will look far more convincing when we watch the movie when it arrives on June this year. And of course, when it does arrive, I will be providing non-spoiler and spoiler reviews and also reporting on its box office weekend, where I'm still thinking it will hit anywhere from around 500 to 700 million worldwide. It does seem that some people have forgotten a lot about the controversy surrounding Ezra Miller, and again, that may dissipate even further when the movie comes closer to its overall release. But look out for future coverage of this movie when it arrives, and if there are any other headlines or announcements surrounding this film, I will of course provide further commentary on this channel as well. And if you have any other suggestions regarding any other movies or television series or any other issues within the entertainment industry that you'd like to see me cover, then also let me know in the comments, and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on those topics within the future. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.